First story. I'll start by saying I never expected my life to change because of something so small. It wasn't some big, dramatic event, no car crash, no breakup, no shocking betrayal. It was a simple, random decision that I made one day in college, and now, 10 years later, I can see how it shifted the trajectory of everything. It was my sophomore year. I wasn't particularly focused on academics. To be honest, I spent most of my time either gaming in my dorm room or grabbing beers with my roommates at the local dive bar. I was an engineering major, but that was more out of convenience than passion. My dad was an engineer, my older brother was an engineer, and it just seemed like the thing to do. One Friday afternoon, I had just finished my last class of the week and was heading back to the dorm. I passed a flyer on the student center board, advertising a free workshop on basic coding. Python for beginners, it said. Now, I knew next to nothing about coding. I had taken one introductory class freshman year and barely passed. But for some reason, I stopped and read the whole flyer. The workshop was on Saturday morning, and for some inexplicable reason, I felt this tiny urge to go. I wasn't some driven student looking for extra opportunities. I didn't think coding was cool or even useful for my major. It was just one of those moments where you get this random feeling, like maybe you should be doing something different than usual. Maybe it was because I didn't have any big plans that weekend, or maybe I was just bored with my routine. Whatever it was, I took the flyer down, shoved it into my backpack, and kept walking. That night, my roommates were planning a big party. They were trying to convince me to join them, saying it was going to be legendary. I almost caved. In fact, around midnight, I was standing at the door, keys in hand, ready to head out. But something made me stop. The flyer for the coding workshop was sticking out of my bag, and I stared at it for a moment. For the first time in a long time, I felt curious, like maybe I was missing out on something other than just another night of cheap beer and bad decisions. I tossed my keys on the desk, texted my friends that I was staying in, and went to bed. The next morning, I rolled out of bed, threw on a hoodie, and went to the workshop. I sat in the back, half expecting it to be boring or too complicated. But as the instructor started going over the basics, something clicked. For the first time in a long time, I felt engaged. Python wasn't that hard. In fact, it was kind of fun. The logic behind it made sense in a way that nothing else in my classes ever had. By the end of the workshop, I had written my first basic program, and I felt this weird sense of accomplishment. That afternoon, I went back to my dorm, downloaded a bunch of free coding resources, and started teaching myself more. It wasn't like I had this grand vision of becoming a coder or changing my career. I just liked it. It was a puzzle, and every time I figured something out, it felt like I was unlocking a new level in a game. Over the next few months, I spent more and more time coding. I even started skipping out on some of the parties and late-night hangouts to stay in and work on little projects. My friends thought I was crazy. "You're seriously going to miss out on Friday night for coding?" they'd ask. But I didn't care. I wasn't doing it for anyone else. By the time I graduated, I had a pretty solid grasp of Python and had started dabbling in web development. I was still technically an engineering major, but I knew I didn't want to pursue a traditional engineering job. So, when it came time to apply for jobs, I took a leap. I applied for a software developer role at a mid-sized company, even though I didn't have a formal degree in computer science. To my surprise, I got the job. My interviews were more interested in the projects I had worked on than my degree. They liked that I had taught myself and stuck with it. I started working in tech, and for the first time, I felt like I was doing something that I actually enjoyed. Fast forward to now. I'm 32, working as a senior software engineer at a startup that just secured its Series B funding. I've had the chance to work on some really cool projects, lead teams, and even mentor younger developers who are just starting out. Looking back, I can trace it all back to that one random Saturday morning in college. Here's the thing, I wasn't some genius who saw my future clearly from the start. I was just a bored college kid who decided to go to a workshop because I had nothing better to do. But that one small decision opened up a whole new world for me. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had gone to that party instead. I probably would have had a fun night, made some bad decisions, and woken up with a hangover. But that would have been it. I wouldn't have found this passion, wouldn't have discovered this whole side of myself that I didn't even know existed. Life is weird that way. You never know what's going to end up being important. You never know which small decision is going to end up shaping the next 10 years of your life. And that's kind of exciting, isn't it? So, if you're reading this, maybe next time you get that random urge to do something different, something small that seems insignificant, go for it. You never know where it might lead. Second story. I never thought a spur-of-the-moment decision to go on a road trip would lead to the biggest break in my career. In fact, the whole thing started as a joke between me and my best friend, Ryan. We were stuck in the rut of our usual weekend routine, the same bars, the same faces, the same conversations. I had just quit my dead-end job in marketing after months of frustration, and Ryan was juggling the monotony of his office job. So, one Friday night, we were sitting in his apartment with a couple of beers, and I casually said, we should just pack up and drive somewhere. Anywhere. Ryan raised an eyebrow, gave me a grin, and said, "You serious?" And that's how it started. The next morning, we threw some clothes and snacks into the trunk of his old Honda Civic and hit the road with no particular destination in mind. We figured we'd just drive north from Chicago and see where we ended up. Wisconsin? Minnesota? Who cared? The whole point was to get away from everything. The first few hours of the trip were blissful. Windows down, music blasting, no responsibilities in sight. We stopped at a diner just outside of Milwaukee, ate greasy pancakes, and laughed about how ridiculous this trip was. It felt like the perfect escape. By late afternoon, we were cruising through the backroads of northern Wisconsin when Ryan suggested we stop at this random small town for the night. The place was tiny, population maybe a couple thousand, tops. It was the kind of town where the gas station is also the grocery store and the local bar doubles as a restaurant. It was charming in that quiet, unassuming way, so we decided to stick around. We found a cheap motel and walked to the only bar in town, a place called the Rusty Moose. It was exactly what you'd expect: dim lighting, old wooden furniture, and a bartender who looked like he'd seen everything. The locals were friendly enough, but we definitely stood out as the city guys. Ryan and I grabbed a couple of beers and started chatting with a group of people at the bar, just making casual small talk about the weather, sports, and, eventually, what we did for work. I didn't expect anyone to care about my situation. I was unemployed and still trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. So when one of the guys, an older man in his late 50s named Joe, started asking me more about my background in marketing, I was a little surprised. Turns out, Joe was the owner of a small but growing outdoor equipment company that had recently moved its operations to Wisconsin. He was looking to expand their online presence, but wasn't sure how to approach digital marketing or e-commerce. I hadn't planned on talking business that night, but after a couple more beers, I found myself sharing my frustrations about my last job, my ideas about how companies could market better, and what I thought was wrong with a lot of traditional marketing strategies. Joe listened intently and asked more questions. By the end of the night, he handed me his card and said, "You know, I like the way you think. If you're interested in something new, give me a call." At the time, I didn't think much of it. People hand out business cards all the time, right? I figured he was just being polite. But the next morning, while Ryan and I were grabbing breakfast before heading back to Chicago, I couldn't stop thinking about Joe's offer. I pulled out his card and showed it to Ryan. "Should I actually call him?" I asked, half joking. Ryan shrugged and said, "What do you have to lose?" So, I did. I gave Joe a call a few days later, and we ended up meeting for lunch back in Chicago the following week. He wasn't kidding about wanting to expand his business, and he was serious about offering me a job. It wasn't some big corporate gig, but it was exactly the kind of thing I had been looking for: a small company, a hands-on role, and the freedom to experiment with new marketing strategies. Plus, it was something I genuinely believed in. His company made high-quality outdoor gear, and I loved the outdoors. It felt like a natural fit. Fast forward a year, and I'm now the head of marketing for Joe's company. It's still small, but we've made incredible strides in building an online presence, and sales are steadily growing. I've been able to implement ideas that I never would have been able to try at my old job. It's given me a sense of purpose I didn't have before, and I honestly feel like I'm part of something meaningful. Looking back, it's wild to think that it all started with a random decision to get in the car and go. If Ryan and I hadn't gone on that road trip, if we hadn't stopped in that tiny town, if I hadn't gone to that bar, none of this would have happened. It's funny how life works that way. Sometimes, the best opportunities come when you're not even looking for them. I guess the moral of the story is this: don't be afraid to shake things up every once in a while. Get out of your routine, say yes to spontaneous adventures, and keep your mind open to new possibilities. You never know what, or who, you might find along the way. Third story. My name is Amanda, and I've always considered myself a pretty organized person. I have a planner, a color-coded calendar, and I've been known to schedule my grocery trips down to the minute. However, all of that meticulous planning unraveled when a simple mistake during my college years led me to discover a career path I had never even considered. It all started during my junior year at a university in Boston. I was majoring in business administration, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do afterward. I had entertained thoughts of marketing, finance, or even entrepreneurship, but nothing felt quite right. In a desperate attempt to figure it out, I signed up for a series of workshops offered by the Career Center. One particular workshop caught my attention, exploring career options in the tech industry. On the day of the workshop, I arrived early and settled into the small conference room filled with eager students. I sat next to a guy named Mark, who was just as anxious as I was. We chatted a bit, and he told me he was majoring in computer science but was unsure about what type of job he wanted. As we waited for the speaker to arrive, I could feel a sense of camaraderie building between us. When the workshop began, it was led by a tech recruiter named Sarah. She was charismatic and knowledgeable, and her passion for the tech industry was infectious. Throughout the presentation, she talked about the various roles within tech companies, the importance of soft skills, and how many different paths there were for non-technical majors like myself. For the first time, I found myself genuinely intrigued by the idea of working in tech, even though I had no formal experience. At the end of the workshop, Sarah mentioned an upcoming networking event in the city where students could meet tech professionals, ask questions, and potentially land internships. She urged us to take the opportunity seriously. That's when I made my first mistake. I registered for the event, thinking I could learn more, and assumed I'd have plenty of time to prepare. Fast forward to the day of the networking event. I had planned to arrive fashionably early and make a great first impression. However, in a classic Amanda move, I accidentally mixed up my dates. I thought the event was on Thursday when it was actually scheduled for Wednesday. So, when I woke up on Thursday morning, I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. I rushed to check my email and confirmed my worst fears: I had missed the event completely. I felt devastated. All that anticipation, all those hopes of meeting people who could guide me in my career, gone in an instant. I spent the rest of the day moping around my apartment, berating myself for my mistake. I felt like I had wasted an opportunity that could have shaped my future. That evening, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. As I strolled through Boston streets, I spotted a small cafe I had never noticed before. On a whim, I walked in, ordered a cup of coffee, and sat down at a corner table. As I sat sipping my drink, I pulled out my laptop and started browsing job listings and internships in the tech industry, hoping to salvage the day. While scrolling through opportunities, I noticed a posting for a local tech startup looking for an intern to assist with marketing and social media management. It was a hybrid position that required a mix of creativity and basic tech skills, and I figured I could handle it. I decided to send in my resume, even though I didn't have much experience. After all, what did I have to lose? A few days later, I received an email inviting me to an interview. To my surprise, the interview went really well. The co-founders were impressed with my enthusiasm and willingness to learn. They saw potential in me and were excited to offer me the internship position. I couldn't believe it. I had stumbled into this incredible opportunity by accident, all because I had missed a networking event. During my internship, I learned everything I could about the tech world. I spent my days managing social media accounts, conducting market research, and even helping design a promotional campaign for a new product launch. I discovered I had a knack for digital marketing, and it was thrilling to see my ideas come to life. As the months went by, I became an integral part of the team. I was no longer just an intern, I was contributing valuable insights and suggestions that the founders appreciated. I felt fulfilled and challenged in a way I hadn't before. I even found myself staying late to brainstorm new ideas or optimize campaigns, something I never thought I'd enjoy. At the end of the internship, the co-founders offered me a full-time position as a marketing coordinator. I was over the moon. It felt surreal to transition from being a confused college student unsure of her future to securing a job in an industry that sparked my passion. I accepted the offer without hesitation. Looking back, it's fascinating how a simple mistake, a wrong date on my calendar, led me down a path I never expected. I often think about how easily I could have avoided that cafe and missed the chance to apply for the internship. If I had attended the networking event, I might have spent the evening waiting in vain for connections that never materialized. Instead, that little mistake allowed me to explore a career in tech, something I had never even considered before. Today, I'm proud to say I've built a successful career in digital marketing within the tech industry. I work with amazing people, I'm continuously learning, and I feel fulfilled in my work. If I had stuck to my rigid plans, I might have missed out on all of this. So, if you're reading this and you find yourself feeling lost or frustrated with your current path, remember that life is unpredictable. Sometimes, mistakes can lead to the most significant opportunities. Don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone and explore the unexpected, you might just find your passion in the process.